If I don't want sex, I want a sandwich. What a fun and great quote to start off the video too. That is not my quote. That is not from me. I'm going to share with you who said it and where I got it in just a moment. But before I get into that, welcome to my channel, Life by Shauna. If you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to press a button wherever it is, and you will get very occasional emails that they put out when I make a new video. So I talk about all sorts of things, mainly about what God's doing in my life. It's been like a video blog journey type thing. But I also talk about travel, relationships. I think next time I do one, I might be doing it on the kitchen remodel that we are almost done with. So lots of stuff like that. Anyways, okay, let's get back to the quote. So I've been saying this quote for almost 20 years. I got it out of this fabulous book, The Proper Care and Feeding of a Husband by Dr. Laura Leschlinger, which I'm sure, I apologize, I'm probably murdering her last name, the pronunciation of it. Anyways, it is in the introduction, so not even the first chapter. She starts it off with this quote. And I'll have to say this, if there was ever a quote that described the 80-20 rule for understanding your man, I think this would be it. And I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, the 80-20 rule. Like, you do 20% of the things that you do, make 80% of the difference. If we can get these two things right with our husbands, then it makes a big part of the difference in your relationship, because men are pretty simple, you know, and I say that in a very positive way, which I think is why she kind of labeled it the proper care and feeding of a husband. It sounds like it should be like the proper care and feeding of your dog or of a parakeet or something. Anyways, funny story on that. I knew I was going to do the video today, so I'm like, I'm going to pull out that book and I'm going to show them where that quote is. And when I pulled it out, I realized I have been saying the quote wrong for almost 20 years. But it is real close. Okay, this is what it actually says. This is from a man, of course. Men are only interested in two things. If I'm not horny, make me a sandwich. By a random guy named John. And another one is, as a man, I can tell you our needs are simple. We want to be fed, we want our kids mothered, and we want lovin'. From Vince. One more, and this is a longer quote, but I'm just going to say the end. You can see, I have them underlined here. Just remember that we are men, and know that our needs are simple but not to be ignored. A good man is hard to find, not to keep. So, I've got a funny story about this. A personal story, because I normally do when I make these videos. Not that personal. It's, let me just get into it. So, I decided to make this video because a while back I was at a wedding shower. And, you know, everyone's going around giving their favorite advice for a marriage. And, you know, my advice is whenever I'm in a situation like that, I have advice I have to give for a marriage. I say two things. They're always the same two things. And I feel like they're pretty practical. You know, everyone else has these like super, like, great sounding, kind of spiritual, like great things to say. I feel like mine are just super practical. I'm kind of practical though, except when it comes to shoes. Don't talk to my dad about that, since he had to help me move several times. I have a lot of shoes. Anyways, here's my two pieces of advice. One, because when you're getting married, you're probably registering for a lot of stuff, or you're buying stuff to start a house. Get good quality kitchen and landscaping stuff. if you've been married a long time, you know that's like would be super great advice, because you get the cheap stuff and it just goes bad. I bought a cheap shovel years ago. I was like 19, and the first time I used it, I bent it, like put it in the ground, bent. So just practical advice right there. The second piece of advice is using my favorite quote, because I feel like, I could say a word of advice, but everyone knows me. They're like, she's not an expert. But I can use someone else's advice that might be the same thing that I would say, but because they're considered an expert, it's taken better. So I'm like, I'm going to use my favorite quote from Dr. Laura Schlesinger, whatever. And so I don't like mentally, I don't think I mentally think in my mind like, oh, what is everyone's reaction going to be? I think you just kind of assume like, oh, I'm going to say this, and people kind of laugh, that's not quite the whole reaction I got. And maybe I need to pare down my thoughts on what people's reactions should be in situations like this, because if you know from watching one of my other videos, sometimes my thoughts on what someone's reaction is going to be is far different. 5 minutes and 52 seconds. If you guys have seen that video, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so I say the quote, and like how great I think it is. And, I get a few of the ladies in the room, they're like nodding their head and laughing, I get a few that just have kind of the nervous giggle, like, oh, there's Shauna saying something cheeky again, And then, to my surprise, I feel like it doesn't go over well with a whole group of them, like kind of a younger group, the younger crowd. It didn't seem to go over well at all. And I was like, why? Like, I figured everyone would be like, oh yeah, like that's true. Because, if that quote was said in a room full of guys, that all the guys would be like whooping and hollering and probably like high-fiving each other like, yeah, that's the truth. And so it made me think, it got me thinking, and I realized later, I guess they were a bit offended by it. And I was like, well, why would someone be offended? Like, we're just talking about the needs of a man. And I guess their thought was like, well, who's to say that I'm not working all day and maybe I want to come home to a good cooked meal, or who's to say I don't have needs, sexual needs? Well, for one, the whole purpose of the giving advice was how to make your man happy, like how to make, advice for a good marriage. To say one person has needs does not negate that the other person doesn't. It's just saying this is what this person's needs are. It almost reminds me, in the same line of thinking, we have this funny thing with me and my kids, and everyone has their funny family things, and I'll be like complimenting one of my kids, like, oh, you look so pretty today, or oh, you did such a good job on that, or oh, you're so smart with that. And the other kids, if there are other kids in the rooms, they'll be like, not me. And we just all laugh hysterically, because how preposterous is it to think that just because someone else is being complimented for their good things, that the other person doesn't have good qualities or abilities or whatever. So in the same way, just because one person's needs are one thing doesn't mean that the other person doesn't have needs. We're just talking about this person's needs. So, but it got me thinking, because, I think unfortunately, in our culture today, there's almost the idea that with all the gender type issues, there's almost the idea that men and women are the same, except for a few different body parts. Well, oh my gosh, that's like so not true. Like, there's so many physical differences in men and women. The way our brains work, different things that our body does that are so different. I think a lot of us are familiar with that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. But in that book, it talks about some of those type of differences. And it makes me laugh because I think one of the age-old rubs that a man and woman can have with each other is a woman has a problem. She wants to talk it out. She wants to talk it out. A man wants to give a solution because that's what men do. They're logical. They come up with a solution. Women, sometimes they have these feelings and they need to talk it through. And then they're upset when the man wants to give a solution and he doesn't understand why she'd be upset, because if she has a problem, why wouldn't she want a solution? Well, this is the thing. Generally speaking, men's brains work in a way that they are more logical just from the start. Like, they're just naturally logical. Women, on the other hand, and it doesn't mean one is better than the other, but it's just a difference in the way we work. Women, on the other hand, are more feelers. And I think any woman out there can testify to this. Like, because I can think of several situations that's happened in my life that were significant, that like, I just had a feeling about something. I didn't understand why. It didn't seem to make sense. Like, why am I feeling this emotion? And the process of talking it out made the left and right brain hemisphere connect, and it became more logical. I began to understand my own feelings better because I was able to talk it out, because that's the way a woman's brain works. And so if you don't understand those differences, by the way, from the way a woman's brain works and the men's brain works, then you can get frustrated at each other by the way they each communicate. And really, you just have to understand the difference. So there are differences. There are differences in the way a man and a woman take in different information, how they react to different things, why one could be so offended by something and one is like no big deal, and vice versa. And so I was thinking about how, what a disservice it has been, unfortunately, today that we have this newer generation that's coming up doesn't always understand some of those differences. There's a verse in the Bible that reminds me of in Titus, where it's talking about the whole thing of mentorship. It talks about how the older men should teach the younger men. It talks about what the older women should teach the younger women. And like, for instance, one of the things that talks about the older men should teach the younger men, like one of the things is just how to be worthy of respect. Like, wow, that's, you hear that. Like, how do you teach a young man to be worthy of respect? There's so much that can go into it. Like when I think of that, I think of, showing integrity. Really like some of the old-fashioned values that I wish were still around, like being a man of your word, that shaking on something actually means something, and it doesn't have to be written in a big old long contract, that your word is your word. For the women, it says like what older women should teach the younger women is how to be lovers of their husband, lovers of their children. And it has a whole list of things, to be pure and discreet and busy at home. So when you think of like teaching someone what it means to be a lover of their husband, like what does that mean? I think a good question to ask in regard to that, or in response to that, is a similar question you would ask if you're trying to figure out any relationship. What does that person need? Like, what are their needs? How can I best serve that person? How can I best show them love? And, for a woman, unless you've been had, unless you've been lucky enough to have a man in your life that's willing to be vulnerable and open up about his true feelings about what role sexuality plays in a man's life, then, or if you've read it, unless you've read it somewhere or had someone teach you about it, we don't realize the impact that sex and sexuality has on a man's psyche, on his confidence in life, how the woman in his life, how she treats him, how much impact it has in his everyday life. I feel like it's unfortunate that in today's culture, we hear so much about like women's needs. It's almost like a woman's needs are at like a holier place in some way than a man's needs. It's like a woman's needs, I feel like, are elevated and legitimized, whereas a man's needs are sometimes just downplayed and even to the point of being villainized. Like, sex is a need for you, like that's like something that's very meaningful to you, like that's almost downplayed or even made to, a man is made to feel like it's almost second rate, second class, compared to a woman saying, I need conversation, I need tenderness or whatever. And I think that's so unfortunate, because just because a man has certain needs, to feel nurtured and to feel loved, and to have sexuality in his life, because that is a way that a man receives love, I feel like it's unfortunate that that is not embraced as something that's meaningful and important to him, and instead it's downplayed. I like to think of it as, because, women, though we have needs in the same area, it's just different. It affects us differently. It doesn't affect us near on as deep a level as it does a man. But if you can put it in terms of like maybe what our needs are, like maybe for connection, for relationship, sometimes that's from like conversation or from that emotional connection. So like if we were to think of our man as all of a sudden not talking to us for a week, what that would feel like for us, and then put it in his terms of maybe a woman not connecting with him on a sexual level for a week, or sometimes longer, 2 weeks. Like if a woman didn't have that affection, that love, or that conversation with her man for 2 weeks, and he just totally ignored her, like how would that make us feel? we would not be happy, I'll tell you that. And we would probably not have any good feelings towards our man in our life if he was treating us that way. But unfortunately, sometimes we feel like he should just do the things he does, work, provide for the family, be a stable role in the family, be a father, and that women don't have to meet those needs that are important to him. If we look at each other's needs on the same level, a man needs that sexual connection. He needs that nurturing feel. Like that's a need of a man in a relationship. Just like as a woman, like, women are a lot more complicated. I wish I could think of just two things. Like I can't, like it says for a man. But we're a little more complicated. But if I could just put a general thing, like, connection, feeling loved, feeling appreciated, and that sort of thing. If we put those on the same level, then we can understand how important this stuff is for our man and how important it is for us to meet those needs. Now, it would be great if he had the same desire to meet our needs. That's when you have a relationship. Let's see, probably for the camera it goes like this. I don't know. Anyways, that's how you have a relationship that works well, is when you're both caught up in thinking, how can I meet the needs of my spouse? How can I meet the needs of this person who is so important in my life? That's when you have a good relationship. And sometimes the relationship has gone to a point where it's not easy to get that circle started, because the circle has been broken for a long time. But the thing is, someone's got to start the circle. If you can do something to help your relationship be better, more vibrant, more passionate, more loving, then someone's got to take the first steps. You can help your relationship be better by meeting the needs of your husband, and in turn, it will come back around, because that's how things work. So that's all I have to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed this little YouTube message I made. I could talk a lot more about it, but I tend to go long on these things. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to message me. Again, I would suggest, if you want to know more about how your man's brain works, or just learn more about your man, or have a better relationship, I would highly recommend getting this book. It's great. I have other books I like too, but that's a good one. Hope you guys all have a great day. Talk to you soon.